Good morning, nations. I love these lights. It's a great honor to speak to you today. I just want to share a little testimony with you. We left our hotel one morning. We drove about an hour, and we got into a little village, and we set up our gospel truck. We began to preach the gospel, and as we're preaching the gospel, I look out, and there's a little man, and he's got his arms out, and he's kind of wandering around the truck. I looked into his eyes, and he looked very lost. He looked very confused. He didn't even seem to know where he was. And one of the pastors comes over to me. He sets his hand on my shoulder, and he says, "This man is insane. We must pray for him." And so I waited a few minutes because I knew evangelist Esmina Garcia was going to get up in just a moment. I knew she was going to pray for the sick. I knew she was going to pray a prayer of deliverance, and I didn't want to cause a disturbance. So as she's preparing to do this, I waved to the man. He kind of smiles. I said, come here. And I'm off to the side. But then he looked back at me and his face began to change. It began to contort. It was like this smile, this wicked, predatorial grin came over his face. It was like the look of a hungry wolf beginning to approach a very scared little lamb. And all I could do was smile because I knew Jesus loved him. And I knew that the predator was about to become the prey. And so he comes over to me. And I open my arms up to hug him and embrace him. And he opens his arms up as well to receive me. And I think this is going really good. And then he drops his shoulder. He wraps his arms around my waist. He lifts me up off the ground. And I thought, this is not going so well anymore. But then it was like a power shot through my body and hit this man. And he froze and he puts me back down. And all I could do was just hold him close. And I wrapped an arm around him. When evangelist Esmina began to pray for the sick, I looked him in the eyes. I said, "Do you want to be free?" And all he could do was nod his head. And so I began to pray, and he began to shout. He began to scream. And I said, "Stop that. Because you have authority over devils. Jesus is king over them all." So he stops. He receives Jesus. And it's powerful. The demon leaves him. And he just begins to cry. I said, "How do you feel?" He says, "I have peace in my heart and in my mind." And I thought, this is so amazing. We have to testify like Jesus set a man free. So we take him up on the truck. He's about to testify. And suddenly another man comes up on the truck. He wants the microphone. He has something to say. He says, I know this man. For 2 years, we have chained him to the wall of his home. But he would break out and he would come out after us." And I looked at him. I said, "Is this true?" He nodded his head. He says, "I was just like the Gadarene in the Bible. They used to chain me. But today, Jesus has set me free."